Hi, everyone. Today I want to talk about the very popular You Are What You Eat, that Netflix documentary on the vegan twin experiment. And so much of what we now know as pretty common accepted knowledge is that veganism, eating a whole foods, plant based diet, has such an impact on our health, longevity, and of course the environment, which includes non humans, the animals. So, what exactly? Let's do a deep dive into just the whole series. It's the four-part documentary and some of the criticism that has been leveled against it, in my opinion, maybe funded by the meat and dairy industry that has historically happened. As a former TV investigative reporter in Miami and St. Louis, I was very familiar with all kinds of shenanigans like that went on back in the day that now are sometimes a little more difficult to prove on social media. But just keep that healthy skepticism in mind as you have maybe yourself listened to the series or hear my review of it, whether or not you should listen to it. Of course, I am a biased reporter, longtime vegan, nationally ranked sprinter, and I believe that eating a healthy vegan diet has totally allowed me to overcome tons of obstacles and maintain a lot of energy and stamina through everything that I've done. So, the health benefits of veganism are many. Um, First of all, if you go to a cardiologist or just have your heart examined, tested through the many different ways they can do that now, through a stress test, heart ejection factor measurements. Um, if you have just the beginnings of heart disease, or if you're at high risk, maybe a high genetic risk, there are now 4 genes that they've identified that deal with how your body processes cholesterol, those kinds of things. Your doctors may be telling you to go vegan because it is the number one defense against heart disease. We can see through tests, and of course, this series, You Are What You Eat, documented this as well, how quickly going vegan can almost reverse heart disease and certainly improve many of the metrics that are used to measure how good your heart is. And so the health benefits not only permeate through cardiac health, but also through brain health, through the health of your colon, whether or not you're at risk for getting colon cancer. The buzzwords are your gut biome, your gut health. All of these phrases that are mentioned in You Are What You Eat are very much relevant, and we have known about this for decades. It's now just research finally that's getting in the mainstream. I wrote the first book, my first of 6 books, Eat Vegan on $4 a Day, and my big line in there is there's no money in broccoli. There's no broccoli association, no broccoli corporation, no company that makes broccoli. So you're kind of on your own to be your own investigative reporter like I was for 18 years to figure out the truth about health and fitness. And to the best you can, follow the money. Who paid for it? Remember that Got Milk campaign where they had all these actors and actresses, they got paid to wear a white milk mustache to show how healthy milk was, or how popular it was, not even healthy, because we are the only species that drinks milk from another species. So nutritionally, we don't need it. That mammalian milk is very species specific. Cow's milk is made to make baby cows grow into ginormous cows in a very short period of time. Human milk is made to make our brains grow pretty large in a short period of time, especially compared to other mammals. So these are just some of the health benefits of veganism that You Are What You Eat touched on. Of course, there is the environmental impact, and You Are What You Eat, the vegan twin experiment, did amazing capturing of some of the most horrific, graphic videos I've been watching for decades, and many of us have, but some people are just now seeing this for the first time in the mainstream, of what happens to pig poop, for example, or chicken poop. It goes into these, I won't even call them ponds or lakes, they are retention lagoons that are brown from the air, and you can easily identify them if you're flying over them. And what the farmers have to do is put them in like these atomizers, and it sprays this mist all over neighboring properties. And finally, well, not finally, actually, this happened a long time ago where people started filing lawsuits. What is new is that they are winning. And that is because lawyers have figured out that there may be some money to be had, as some of these suits are actually going to court or maybe getting sued the night before they are supposed to go to court, because it just doesn't look good to be spraying poop in people's faces and on property that doesn't belong to the farms. But, You Are What You Eat also made a big point of that farmers are not always on board with this stuff. It's kind of how the big corporations have come in and told them they have to run their farms. And even though the overview of this series, that because this is a vegan twin experiment, they took twins who have the exact DNA. One of them was fed a vegan diet, the other one was fed a meat-based diet. And of course, as you might expect, in most cases, the vegan diet came out the winner on all the parameters that were measured. One of the criticisms of the series, it was only 4 parts, is that it did not get into a lot of detail concerning the research and the stats that were collected. I mean, they touched on it a little bit. I suppose there may be related websites where you can find this out more in detail if you want. And because it was on Netflix, they had to make it watchable, and they developed some of the personalities of the twins, showing how much they actually looked and talked and sounded alike, and yet how they responded to these very different diets, even though their DNA was pretty much a clone of each other. So it was really cool to see how that played out. But, one of the big criticisms is that this was a infomercial for veganism, to which I say, so what? How many infomercials have we had from the meat and dairy industry? There's so much propaganda that's been put out there in the form of unbiased information that we know has been funded by the meat and dairy industry. That I used to, when I did media consulting, I would actually break down how much, because one of my clients was the Watermelon Promotion Board, and they got like 3% of all the federal money that was dedicated to advertising of so-called healthy foods like meat and dairy. And meat and dairy got a huge chunk of this money, which is why you saw all of those ads, and you don't see them so much anymore because there has been such an outcry and outrage to how these foods that really don't promote human health and aren't good for us got so many advertising dollars. So not fair. I don't care if it was an infomercial, but an infomercial seems to suggest it's somehow not true, that it's propaganda. This information that was in You Are What You Eat, most of it, I would say, I'm just going to go ahead and say this, 100%, nothing that I learned that was new. No video that I hadn't seen of factory farming. What was cool and what did bring a tear to my eye was when they showed the pig farmer who said, I hated doing this. And he was talking to an animal rights activist. And in theory, You Are What You Eat said, these two shouldn't be talking to each other. They should be clashing with each other. And instead, they came up with some common ground. And one of the last scenes that you see of the two of them together, and spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, you might want to stop the review at this point, because I'm going to tell you what happened, but it just totally got me very emotional, and many things, because I have seen so much, I don't have the shock value anymore. But this pig farmer, he opens up the door to the stalls where all these poor animals had been squished together. And what you see, instead of animals being overcrowded and cramped, no matter how humane supposedly they were raised, were mushrooms. So mushrooms are the wave of the future, and grown in a dark, moist environment, we can easily get great nutrition from mushrooms and a varied whole foods, plant-based diet. So it was very cool to see that. Just a lot of personal verification that I have from You Are What You Eat. So much of it's been true. Many of you know my mom and both sisters had breast cancer. I'm the only adult female who didn't get it. We were part of the BRCA1 and BRCA2 gene studies. And I love that You Are What You Eat really delved into this whole concept of epigenetics, how genes are turned on and off. And even though it took decades before I could actually go get the genetic testing that our family participated in, I lived my life as if I had the gene. And only 10% of all breast cancer cases are genetic anyway. So some of the cases of breast cancer in my family were environmentally triggered. And that's the takeaway. There is much you can do, as You Are What You Eat suggests, that you can turn some of these genes off, or just never get them started in the first place. Another thing that I loved about You Are What You Eat, the vegan twin experiment went into, was the whole concept of sexual function in women. Now, if you've seen my reviews of The Game Changers, that movie mainly dealt with male athletes. And I've been long advocating we need to look at women, especially those of us who have been vegan and running for 44 years now. I think it's real important that we give women their equal time, and You Are What You Eat did just that. And they actually, again, spoiler alert for what's coming, took cameras and were able to get changes in heat and other biological responses from women as they were shown pornography to see what happened. Because here's the deal, and I talk about this in my book, Vegan Sex, which came out a full year before the movie The Game Changers, which also got into this topic. I co-authored with a vegan cardiologist. And the whole idea is it's about blood flow. What's good for the heart is good for other parts. And so the same applied to the women in this case. So those who, the twins who had eaten a vegan diet, they had more blood flow. They got more excited because blood is just coursing through their body, not only through their hearts, but through their other parts as well, like their brains and their sexual function. And the reason for this, and again, I talk about this in one of my 6 books, Vegan Sex, is the vessels in the lower part of the body are much smaller and narrower. And that's why erectile dysfunction is that leading indicator of heart disease by so many years, because those smaller arteries and vessels clog up a lot sooner than by the time you have that death-defying heart attack in your heart, where the arteries are much bigger. So Very cool that this was verified yet again in another documentary. And then the final thing I want to talk about that the You Are What You Eat, the vegan twin experiment, made reference to is how much more energy the vegans typically had, and that they just seemed to feel better. And even though it was only a short period of time, 8 weeks, that they just seem to look better. And that's one of the things that I always get when I tell people that I'm 71 years old. It just happened to me today. I was on a Zoom call and this guy is just looking at me like, I just can't wrap my head around that, and the way I'm moving around and I'm agile and flexible. He said, how is that even possible? And I'm going, being on a vegan diet and then incorporating 44 years of aerobic activity called running, even if it's been just a little bit, or if I've had to back off for various reasons, it's magical. And I believe it has kept me looking young, or younger than my years I often get pegged at 15, 20 years younger than I am. And unfortunately, my sisters never made it out of their 70s. And I am bound and determined to beat the genes, beat the odds, and I encourage you to do the same. So if you have watched this series, I would love to hear what you think about it. Do you think it was a vegan infomercial? Do you agree with some of the critics who said it was just too biased? Well, we got to eat one way or another. And I'd like to know, of all the milk and dairy documentaries that are out there, were their producers meat eaters, were they dairy consumers? Because that's one of the things that, a couple of people involved in the production of the video were vegan. Well, maybe that's what motivated them to do this very important documentary. And, I think they really were just following the study. And if somebody else wants to replicate it and prove differently, well, I would say just go right ahead and see what happens. Because the reality is, I've been running around as long as I possibly can since my first book came out, Eat Vegan on $4 a Day. And yes, you can still do that. Totally possible. But I have been trying to yell as loud as I can, I get enough protein, I get enough energy. Just look at my face, it's not always the genes that gave me this face. My sisters, in addition to breast cancer, had diabetes and major heart disease. And and the other thing that You Are What You Eat touched on was MRSA, antibiotic resistance with cattle and chickens, because these animals are so cramped and crowded that they are given prophylactic, preventative antibiotics so they won't get infections. And my oldest sister, that was actually what killed her. That was her official form of death, was MRSA. So I do believe that we are consuming so much of these antibiotics that we don't even know about, that we are just building up resistance to antibiotics. And this is a very, very serious problem. So let me know below what you thought of the series, and any positive things that you have going on that in your vegan journey that have helped you. I'd love to hear from you. All right, everyone, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.